Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of NITRO Talk here on Everything Nitro. Today, I'm joined by the first man to go 320 miles per hour in a Top Fuel dragster. That man, Cory McClenathan. What's going on, Cory?
Not much, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. And I've been watching a lot of the stuff you've been doing lately, and I saw my old Gary Selzy, my buddy, on there, and this is fun stuff for me. I like to do this, so thanks for having me.
Of course, and this is what the fans, even myself, everybody, doesn't matter if you're a former driver, fan of the sport, or a crew chief, you love to hear the backstory because everybody has a journey and no one's is the same. So I'm excited to talk with you today. We got to talk with your buddy Whit Bazemore too a little bit. That was a lot of fun. But today, this is going to be a Top Fuel version, let's say. We all, kings of the sport. So here we are. But before we dive into Top Fuel, your Top Fuel career, you came in the scene 1989 in a top alcohol dragster, and you won your first national event. Is that right?
Very lucky, yes. And I was in Denver, Colorado, and Blaine Johnson was next to me in the final. So that was big. That was real big, actually. So we knew he had been doing so well, and in his career, I had followed that. And I actually hired, oh gosh, Ora Vasquez used to help them a lot, and back in the day before he passed. And I mean, I went right down, found the right guy, and grabbed him away from them, and never looked back. And then being able to race him at my first national event in the final. I mean, pinch me, dude. I mean, it was crazy. And him being such a good driver and all, and it was a very close race, but we came out on top, and that was like, my dad wasn't even there for that one, so he was
Oh man.
calling the racetrack and trying to get a hold of somebody, and I think it was Dave McClellan was there, and then he got on the phone. He's, oh yeah, your son's in the winner's circle right now. He won. My dad didn't know who to call, so that's how he got through. And it was really a cool little story. So
it for sure wasn't like today where there's internet and radio and there's all types of ways to get your results, but that's pretty cool. So you had a little bit of success in alcohol dragsters, and what made you want to get into a top fuel dragster?
Well, we were running the car as a family-owned operation at the time, and we, obviously we're sinking some money into it in the alcohol dragster, and we always had, spare parts, and we were running Brad Anderson fathead motors, and so we had to have what it took to really go do it. Little did I know that we were kind of following the same, pattern as they do with the top fuel cars. So my dad and I and mom sat down one night and said, okay, here's our budget from alcohol dragster. We already have an 18-wheeler. We already have all the specialty parts. We're doing good on motors. And finally, all of a sudden, they just said, you know what? It is not that big a jump for us to make that happen. And I think that's when we got a hold of Daryl Gwen and Jerry Gwen and the family and said, hey, we'd like to buy one of your cars. So it all happened so fast. It was crazy. Next thing I know, we're in Gainesville, and Jerry's there, and Frank Hawley's there, and they, obviously they send my license off, but I'll tell you, the first time I did a burnout in a top fuel car, I was like, this is no alcohol dragster, let me tell you. So, very, very different. So, but you know what? Everybody has their starting point, and that was me, man. I loved it. I loved it. And to be very honest, my very first drag car was a 1956 oval window VW, because my father and I, we owned a VW shop and worked on that, and that was their drag car, and I just worked on it. His partner got sick one weekend, and I took the chore behind the wheel. I was only 16 years old, and we were out of Orange County, and boom, won the race. And it was like, okay, this is like a major trend. So from there, it was just, I want to go faster, want to go faster, want to go faster. And, luckily enough to have parents who were really behind me and some good sponsors at the time, small ones, but they all helped back then, little guidance from Kenny Bernstein. He was always a good mentor to have. And then we finally just said, okay, let's do this. And we're gonna. We were really very excited. We did not have a, let's say, top-notch crew chief, but we had enough to get by, and try to run the car and get used to it. So that was probably, the most exciting part was learning that, hey, I tuned the alcohol dragster, but there's no way I can tune this Top Fuel dragster. It was completely off everything I did. So I think that's when we came along, and then finally got to Brainerd, and I grabbed Jimmy Prock, and we went to dinner one night, and he looked at me and said, "I got to have total control, my guys, and you let me do the work, and you do the driving." And I haven't turned around since. Been unreal. So Jimmy and I had a very special relationship, and I learned how to drive without trying to kill parts, and he learned how to tune without trying to kill parts. But together with all the guys, we were, you know, fairly unstoppable for a young team.
And you mentioned Jimmy Prock. You guys went through your ups as much as you went through your downs. And at the Auto Club Finals, well, it was then the Winston Finals in 1991, this crazy incident. You had a bypass in the second round, and the throttle pinched or something happened. Do you remember anything about that run and how it all played out?
End of '91, yes, the Cory Mack car. What happened was it actually blew the blower off of it. But when it blew the blower off of it, it enabled me to shut the fuel off, and everything was sitting right on top of the motor. It was just dumping fuel down inside there. So I had no real way to shut everything down, and it just kept going and going and going. It was like, I mean, it was only going 100, 106 or something like that. I remember passing the safety safari going, "Hey, come on, we're gonna need you down here," type of deal. So it was not the way I wanted it to go at the end of '91, that's for sure. But I think we kind of bounced back, and we get, really got our stride with Jimmy Prock in '92.
Yeah, and you get your first ever career victory at Memphis Motorsport Park with Jimmy Prock. That's got to be big time. Family owned car, the Mac Attack. You're such a young driver coming into your second season, and you get a victory. Sometimes, drivers, it takes years to get that first victory, but you got it. So how
Yeah,
did that feel? And was that a bit of a surprise?
it was not really a surprise to me with the way Jimmy was tuning at the time, the way the car was running. But but yeah, I mean, trying to get that first win and get that monkey off your back, so to speak, and then got to race Michael Brotherton in Daryl's car in the final there. Um, we were getting ready to park the car. It was
Wow.
getting a little bit too expensive for us, and that win propelled us on to keep on going, and that's why we were able to do so well in '92. We went to a lot of semifinals, and then winning that race, that really lifted everybody's spirits and moved forward. And I think that was a turning point for us.
And you were the first driver to run in the 370s at Maple Grove Raceway. And
Yeah,
Jimmy
with
Prock, there he is again.
the
He
Prock
really,
Rock.
the Prock Rocket, that name and Cory McClenathan in the early 90s was a duo. I know there
it
was a lot of
was,
other
it
stuff
was
going on with Coletta and stuff, but boy, that car was going.
Yeah, and actually, we got to be Scott and Colette and I got to be good friends, and we invited them down to our shop. So one point we had our operation there in Anaheim, and then the Colettas were down there, had all their stuff, and with Dick LaHaye tuning it. So we had some really really cool times, working together and trying to figure out what made them so fast all the time as well. So so that worked out really well.
And you skipped the Montreal race, and it's no secret, you only lost the championship by 92 points in your sophomore season. Man, I mean, that's got to be tough. But you're so young, you're thinking to yourself, man, I got plenty of years ahead of me. I mean, this championship, if I'm this close early on, I'm going to be a force to be reckoned with later on in my career.
Correct. I mean, I looked at it like, okay, wait a minute. If I had just rented somebody's car and went down at that point, all you had to do was show up and do a burnout, and that would have been enough points to make the difference. We
Wow.
decided as a family that we would not go there, so we could finish off the rest of the season financially wise. So it was a financial business decision, basically. But yeah, I mean, being able to finish number two and right on Joe Amato's tails and ahead of Kenny Bernstein and Perdome and all these big names, I was like, it didn't matter to me. I was just so happy to be amongst all my heroes that I've grown up and watched over the years, and thinking, hey, at at my age right now, this is about as good as it gets.
Right.
um, I was the oldest guy on the team at 27 years old. So
Wow.
it was like, okay, let's get ready for next season. And with Jimmy there, I never had to worry about anything. He's just like a little mad scientist. He always came up with something good. And when the chips were down and we weren't the fastest car there, then I would try to help him make up for that. Especially when I was younger. So it was like a dream come true for me, my family, for Jimmy and his family, and to go out and do so well, and thinking, okay, we got a pretty good career ahead of us here. But you know what? For now I'm 58 and was a bridesmaid 4 different times, but always in the hunt. I mean, I have nothing to be ashamed of at all. I would have loved to have been top fuel champion in NHRA, but at the same time, a lot of great things happened during the way, and got to learn to drive other people's cars. And I'll tell you, the day Larry Miner stepped up and walked up to me and said, "Hey, I hear you're parking the car after this year." I said, "Yes, sir, we are." And he turned right around and said, "How'd you like to drive the McDonald's car for me?" And I was like, "You
Wow.
mean like the second car?" Because he did have two cars at one
Uh-huh.
point. And then he goes, "No, no." He goes, "The main car." And at that time, me and Ace were really good friends. I went to him for advice. I went to him during the races. What about this guy? Trying to sum up who I was racing, and Ed always had the perfect thing to say to me. And most of the time it was just go do your job, that type of deal. But when I got that position, I was like, man, this is. I mean, the old Ace McCullough was the guy that I'd be next to getting ready to get in a fight, and he'd hand me his glasses, and I'd be, well, it's on now, so here we go. So I kind of, he knew about it, I knew about it, and I kind of, didn't want to hit him face to face and have a bad deal, but at the same time, he caught up with me one day and grabbed me and said, "It's the business, kid. Don't worry about it. It's just what we are."
That's great, and that's
So,
probably what you needed to hear at that time, right?
oh yeah, because I'd rather have that than have my butt beat by the Ace McCullough. Believe me, and he
Instead of
could do
being the one next to him dishing the beatings, you'd be receiving it, huh?
100%. It wouldn't be the first
Oh,
time, but I didn't want it from my one of my friends.
that's so crazy. And Lee Beard was your tuner. Was that your
Yes,
first stint with Lee Beard at the time?
yes, sir. Yeah.
Wow, and then you guys go to Arizona, second race out, and you win the race and set the national ET record.
Yes, sir.
So out of the gate, I mean, you filled those shoes as good as anybody probably could at that time. And Larry Miner behind you, you had Cruz Pedregon as your teammate, the McDonald's team. Like, what a fun era that must have been to do that. And you had your own McDonald's toy car as well at the Happy Meals.
Yeah, which worked out great for me because I'm big on McDonald's. So that was probably the premier sponsorship to have, and not really for the racing side of things, but I love kids. I love young minds, and I mean, having being the McDonald's driver, that gets you a long way with the kids, and the families obviously, and we just really had a lot of fun with it. Jimmy Spencer was driving NASCAR at the time. And so when I went to Joe Gibbs, I got even a bigger taste of kind of what it's all about. And I had to grow up in a hurry because I was a hothead. And when you work for a guy like Joe Gibbs, you need to stop and check yourself, let's say.
For sure. And in that 94 season, speaking of hotheads, no, not that Don Perdome was a hothead, but you kind of got into a little bit of a staging duel at one of the races, maybe two. And that final round at Rockingham, you and the Snake, a little bit of a staging duel. And all was fun and games at the far end. Nobody had anything bad to say, but you guys got awfully close
Oh
in that
yeah.
head-to-head matchup.
And I love the way they put it out there, like, oh, no big deal. But it was pretty heated actually, because we I knew he liked to stage last. That was a big thing. So a guy like me who is into whatever it takes to win, I started doing that with Dawn. And I mean, you think it 2 or 3 times, but I'm thinking it happened like 3 or 4 or 5 times actually in my career. But he was a fierce competitor, so it was just one of those things. I felt like he should have came in earlier, or how long are we going to wait it out? I mean, we were starting on for long enough for Buster to turn around at us. Like, what do you guys? But yeah. I mean, Prudhomme was probably my biggest nemesis back then. That's for sure. But it was easy for me because I was thinking, okay, this guy's really tall, stringy, and I am a young guy with lots of attitude. So I definitely left the helmet on. But yeah, we got in there and got nose to nose more than a few times. That's for sure.
So in Topeka, later on that year, you were about payback. You got him back. You beat him in the final round. So there you go.
All
Like you
about
were talking about that rivalry with him, that's really cool to see. And then Joe Gibbs comes around. You just mentioned driving for Larry Minor and it transfers into Joe Gibbs Racing. Did that catch you by surprise, or was that like a rumor mill that kind of
no,
you knew about?
that caught me by surprise. I had no idea it was going to go that way. Um, I was just so grateful to Larry for bringing me in and giving me the chance. And then all of a sudden, boom, here we go. We're going to have a meeting with Joe Gibbs. And I was thinking, you mean the Redskins coach? Are you kidding me? I mean, he's going to get into drag racing. So I was all about it. He's, very admired in sports and very religious, and, just ended up being one of the best bosses. It's like he used to tell me, just, I pay you to do a job, and just go do it with the best of your ability. Try not to embarrass us, and we'll be great. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's used to working with, over 300-pound linebackers and, killer football players. What's he going to be like? He ended up being one of the most soft spoken, easygoing bosses that I've ever had.
Wow. You would think it would be a little bit rougher than that, but that's the truth. I mean, maybe a lot of people would think the same thing, but you were the man in the driver's seat, and you were the one that drove for him for all those years. Nobody else drove a Top Fuel dragster for Joe Gibbs, so that's got to be a little extra special for you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, he was one of those guys who stood back and watched. He wanted to know what each person was about, and on and off the track, and he would just kind of let you do your thing. If he had to kind of reel in the reins a little bit, he would. But I mean, he's just very calculated, very smart. His The way he speaks in a crowd and everything else, I think I learned more about public speaking uh, than I did anything else working for Joe Gibbs. Great guy, great family.
Wow, that's awesome. And you end up picking up the 1996 U.S. Nationals victory. Kind of a bittersweet moment. That was the weekend Blaine Johnson lost his life tragically in a Top Fuel accident. And that was kind of the birth of Tony Schumacher at the time, and you beat Tony Schumacher in that final. Talk about how much it meant to you to win that final round in 1996 with all the sadness around the pits and motorsports. And is that something even today that throughout your whole career, not only was it Indy, but in the memory of Blaine Johnson, that victory was?
Yeah, that was a real big. It was a tough weekend. I was actually qualifying against Blaine when the incident happened, and we had done a wheel stand, so I shut it off. And when I got coasted down, I was still the first one that was closest to him, and jumped out and was trying to help, but there wasn't much I could do about it. So I backed up and let the med guys in there and do their thing. And I'm thinking the whole time, he didn't answer back, and that really bothered me. So um, it was rough. I was ready not to race that weekend, to be honest. So I'd have to give that one to Lee Beard, because he's the one who sat me down and said, "Look, in this sport, things like this do happen, and if you want to rise to the occasion, then go out and win this race for him and him and the family." And I took that and parlayed. I went right back. I got grabbed one of my helmets that I've never wore before. I was had some purple and stuff in it, so it wasn't exactly the McDonald's colors, that type of deal. But it was time for a change, and make that change quickly. And it always had the insignia of the bad boy on my helmet, and I'm thinking this has got to be the one. We need to make this happen. And I drove my butt off, and Lee tuned it, and I mean, Mike Green and all the guys, they did such a great job that weekend, and we just literally mowed them down one after the other. And was really happy to actually meet Tony in the final, because Tony was very good about coming to me and saying, hey, I'm having trouble with this in the car, and I want to do this right. And Tony listened, which was a big deal for me. So anytime Tony or anybody, a young driver, comes up and I can tell they're really listening to what you have to say. I like that, because that'll help them. Little did I know he was going on to beat everybody's butt, and championship after championship. So I was helping my rival basically, but at the time, I love that for Tony, because you feel like, well, I had a little bit of part in there of a little bit of mentoring, that type of deal. But once he got the hang of it, there was no stopping him.
That's for sure. And you had a great rest of your Joe Gibbs run. I mean, you had a great rest of your 1996, 7, and 8 seasons. You end up winning, I believe it was 6 national event wins each year. So that's racking up wins quick.
Definitely.
So MBNA comes around, and was that just a different site? I know you went from Lee Beard to Mike Green as a tuner during those late years in the 90s. Did you ever feel that Joe Gibbs Racing would come to an end someday, or was it a bit of a surprise to you in 2000 when he announced that, hey, drag racing after 2000 would be no more for me?
Yeah, I believe he had just gotten so busy, and he could not be at all the races because of the um, NASCAR part of his program. And I think McDonald's and all the sponsors, Champion, and everybody we had on the car really wanted the presence of Joe there. And you just can't be at two places at one time. So it was a long haul. We did very well. Wes Cerny was the last crew chief I had on the MBNA car, and it's one of those things. Did I want to see it end? Heck no. I thought for sure we'd have a much longer relationship and keep Joe in drag racing, because he was definitely the icon, and people really stopped and really admired him. So and I still do to this day, and thank him for the opportunity and all the wins, and all the great parts he always used to keep underneath the trailer for us. So it was a kind of a bittersweet end type of deal, but to have to pack up your stuff at the very end of that year and say, now what? What are
Right.
we going to do? So I was kind of that um, have suit will travel type thing. What's going to be next? And I sat out for a whole year before David Baca and Rick Hinkleman called me. They acquired all this stuff from Brad Anderson. He had bought the whole caboodle, everything,
Wow.
just trailer and all. And then we took that and went right out and started qualifying and running good right off the bat. It was just it was meant to be. It is what it is. But I was just excited to get back behind the wheel again and start racing.
And your driving came through once again. You went in Pomona that first year. right out of the gate. That's pretty cool. The new team, you're showing your driving abilities no matter what car you're in. What led kind of leads me to a little bit off track. So you've always been a top fuel guy. It's no secret, right? You're a top fuel guy. We've seen you drive, the off road and the Lucas Oil Road Dirt Series. Have you ever had any itch to get in a funny car?
I have actually. I talked to Timmy Wilkerson a few times last year, and I had mentioned it to other people before. And I really wanted to get my funny car license. So if there was ever an opportunity that I could go out and do that, and it just never seemed to come to fruition. I mean, it was not to mention expensive to do, but
Right.
at the same time, I had my hands full with the Pro Light truck and racing for the Winter family and out of Orange County, and it was not actually as easy as I was hoping it'd be. I struggled quite a bit in that truck, but at the same time, I love off road, always have. Just never had the time or experience to get in one. So um, I was pretty busy, so I didn't worry too much about it at the time.
I don't know if it was Brian Loans on TV or where I heard that little bit of a rumor, but when I heard Cory McClenathan funny car, that excited me. Even if it was just, you know, short lived and by a rumor, whatever the case was, but that really excited me because you're a guy who can get in anything. You're not afraid to get in anything. So to see you want to even attempt to get in a funny car is something special. Whit Bazemore recently mentioned how easy it was for him to convert from a funny car to a dragster. But when you see the dragster, top field drivers hop in a funny car, it's a little bit more of a transition. But you've been around the sport so long, I feel like that would be a great natural fit for the fans and I mean for you. So that was cool. And that's cool to hear you say, once upon a time it was talked about. And Frank Pedregon mentioned this, and I love this too. He said, ex drag racer is always a drag racer. You're always gonna, hunt to get in the seat, no matter whether you say you're retired or not. You're always kind of peeking your nose out there, seeing what you could do. So hey, it's not to say that you can never be in a funny car someday.
100%. I agree. And I retracted my retirement a long time ago and said I never should have done that because I've always heard that big deal. If you say you're going to retire and don't do it because it's probably not going to happen. And I thought, well, I got my whole life ahead of me, and this should be the second part of my life. And I just couldn't. I can't walk away. I still can't walk away. I mean, I'm there all the time in Pomona. Go to the races that I can afford to go to without, upsetting the family and everything going on at home. But I'm a drag racer for life, and if I ever get opportunity, I will definitely do it. That's for sure.
And to rewind now, you had the opportunity to drive for Daryl Gwynn. You stepped in that
Yes.
car and you guys, I believe you guys brought a little bit of money towards each other and in the right direction. And that was pretty cool. I mean, you bought your first ever top fuel dragster off Daryl Gwynn and his father. And here you are 12 years later, 10 years later, actually driving for the guy. So how meaningful was that, to come full circle?
It was a big deal for me. I had obtained the Berryman sponsorship, and they were ready to go with me wherever I went. And I mean, just one day, Daryl called and said, I think that we can put things together. Why don't you fly down here? And I'm telling you, Andrew, I flew down there, and by the end of that night, we had a contract signed. I mean, it was that
Wow.
quick. I mean, he had the Yankees on there still. We had, GMC was along for the ride with us, so we were able to kind of put together each other's sponsors and go out and race. And I'm telling you, to this day, probably one of my favorite people to work for was the Gwen family.
That's awesome. I mean, it's unfortunate what happened to him in his career, cut so short. I believe Gwyn would still be racing today if that accident had never taken place. He was one of those pedal to the metal, his heart was in drag racing. And, I hopefully we can get him here on Nitro Talk soon. But Fram, How did this Fram deal? When you think of Fram, for me, when you think of Mac Attack, of course, it's you. When you think of McDonald's, it's you. But Fram, a lot of drivers have carried that banner over the years and over the course of their career. But Fram, you're a guy that comes to mind to me.
Yeah, it was. I was driving for the Carrier Boys at that time, and the people at Fram had come to me at least twice, and I think I told them, you guys, you guys really get more bang for your buck staying with Rhonda Hartman, and then John, her husband, he would bring out a car every now and then, so that's two cars for them. So money wise, they were better off with that, and having a girl driver that always brought a lot of steam to the table. So but we did talk for 2 years, and on the third year, they came in and said, we sat down and said, "We're here because you didn't tell us to go, blow sand, and you really understood where we were coming from, and gave us the real deal numbers." And at that point, they set down a contract, and I read it and went, "Here we go." And I signed that thing that day up in the lounge and walked out, and Mark Carrier and Andy Carrier looked at me, and I said, "We got ourselves a sponsor, boys, a big one." And,
Wow.
Never turned around. I mean, I loved being in the Fram car, for Autolite, for Fram, for Bendix. And I was just such a gearhead myself that those were perfect sponsors for me. And we did well together. I mean, first, next thing you know, we're qualifying, we're going rounds. But our first win at Virginia Lovers Nationals, I mean, that was their backyard. So winning that one, that was like winning Indy almost for me. So anytime you go to your sponsor's race and do really well, that's always good. But they were based out of there, and there was a lot of them there. And I remember getting out of the car thinking, there's nothing better than this right now.
And that was the era when you had that terrible crash in Bristol in 2006 with Wes Cerny as your crew chief. Does that, flying through the air, does that come back in your dreams every once in a while? And how did that feel like to go 300 miles per hour up and down as hard as anybody could ever go?
Yeah, it happens so quick when something like that happens and it's dark out, and the next thing I see is sparks in front of me, and then realize I'm like a pole vaulter. I'm way up here. So at that point, it was like, you know what? Get small, get quick, let go of everything, and just grab your, the old, what they say, sprint car guys. They just grab their belts and hang on, and I do that no matter what I'm driving now. If things get bad, that's what you do. You don't want to be holding on to that steering wheel. You need to hold on to your belts, keep your head down. And that one definitely got my attention. That's for sure. By far the biggest wreck that I've ever been in, and probably one of the biggest I've ever seen, actually, if it in the
Absolutely.
Top Fuel. Definitely got everybody worried on that one. Little story, side story. I was in the hospital. They life flighted me to the hospital. I'm in the hospital, and they pull out the shears to cut the driving suit off, and I'm like, no, don't cut this suit off. I don't have a second one, and I plan on being back in a car. So what do I got to do to get out of here? And I could hear this guy yelling in the background, "He's my brother. Where is he? I got to see him." I'm thinking, brother? That's not my brother. And lo and behold, the doors bust open, and here comes Gary Scelzi. And he looks at me and he goes, "Dude, I thought you were dead." One of those things.
Oh my God.
Just really was very cool and classy. And, Gary and I are good friends to this day. He's done a lot with his kids, and he's took over the company and everything. But I'm just a driver at heart, and I'll drive anything basically. So I am making some plans for next year. I can't tell you what it all involves, but I'll be doing probably like triple duty, 3 different cars and 3 different types of racing, not all the same. So it'll be when I can announce it, I definitely will let you know. And
Absolutely.
part of it's already done. I'm waiting for the rest of it to get done. But it's not an NHRA ride. per se yet. So I'm still working on that one too. There's a lot that's going to happen here pretty soon, but wait till the end of the season. Obviously, you can tell the silly season has started already. Everybody's positioning
Absolutely.
themselves for next year, and that happens every year, but normally a little bit later than it did this year. So we have sat down for quite a while and tried to plan out something good, and it'll be a few different venues and some cars that are very cool to drive. So I'm actually very excited about it. But that's not to say if somebody didn't call and say, "Hey, I want you to come drive my dragster funny car," I'd be all over it for sure.
Well, anytime Cory McClenathan has good news, the drag racing community is behind you. So that's great. Can't wait to hear more about that as that news drops. And to dive into our next little bit, Don Schumacher Racing. You know, that's a name. It seems like you were there much longer than you were. I mean, 3 full seasons you were with Don Schumacher. To me, growing up, it seemed like you were there 10 years. You know, it's just that's how nice and that's how good that car was. I mean, of course, you never got to win a championship with Don, but you came close many times. And what was that relationship like? And what did it mean to you to be able to drive one of his cars?
It was a big deal. I mean, Don and I had been friends, and we talked, almost every weekend at the racetrack. Then it came about where he could take over the Fram deal, and I could go drive for him, and it happened overnight, basically.
Wow.
And I just one of those things. I knew that Don Schumacher Racing had the will to win. They had all the parts to win. They had all good crew chiefs, good guys working on the cars. I mean, I really thought, okay, here's my chance to win a championship right here. So, I mean, we're still friends to this day. I went back and drove for him during the COVID times, just to try to help people out and get back out on there. And I myself was very excited to drive a canopy car because that's one car I hadn't got to drive, and we struggled at first with that car. But at the last race was at the real Indy, and that car came around and was running good, and I just fell short against Langdon in the second round. I think he went 72, I went 73 at 330, and we were right there nose to nose. It was a very good race. But if you're going to win, if you're going to lose to a guy, Sean Langdon's the guy to lose to, because him and I have always been friends ever since he came up into the ranks of Top Fuel, and he is a great driver, and I knew I had my work cut out for me. So if I could have just cut the lights that the kids are cutting today, we could have got him. Let's put it that way.
Did you notice any big difference in the canopy car compared to the open cockpit?
Much safer. I mean, I can't express that enough. I sat in one beforehand, and it was Tony's car, but never driven one. And the first pass I made, I'm like, this makes an old guy like me feel like King Kong. I mean, there is nothing to be afraid about when you're in that car. It's very safe. They have been tested. Obviously, we've seen Antron test them out, and it just took that one little piece of fear away from you. Like, no matter what happens, this car is going to keep me together in one piece. So yes, I mean, it's definitely the way of the future. I think every car should have a canopy on it, to be honest, in my opinion. But yeah, it was awesome to get in that car, and had really good guys working on it, and obviously back with Todd Okuhara and Scotty Okuhara at the same time. So it was like a well-fitting shoe. Just step into it and let's get down.
Yeah, you mentioned Todd Okuhara, Tony Stewart was around the pit area. These are guys that you've known for a long time in motorsports. Do you have any funny Todd Okuhara stories?
We were more like family. The more time we spent together, the more time we were together. And Todd is such a soft-spoken guy, and I'm not, obviously. But so there'd be times where I would do something wrong, and Don would come over to chew my butt a little bit, let's say, and we'd be up in the lounge, me and Todd, and I have an opinion, and I can't hold back when it's time. And me and Don would kind of get into it a little bit, and Todd, I remember walking out. Don left, and I got ready to walk out, and Todd looked at me and he goes, "Dude, please don't do that again in front of me." That makes me nervous. So, stuff like that.
Wow.
We really worked well together. And Scotty Okahara is by far the best car chief I've ever worked with. So anytime there was something I was uncomfortable with, he would go beyond what needed to be done to make me feel more comfortable. So having those two, having your back was a big deal.
And you've won 34 national event wins in your career, 5 of those coming with Don Schumacher. You're also a 2016 Australian champion, national champion over there in Australia. How did that all come about? I know you did a little stint of match racing or something in 2007, if I could remember. You went over there, and that was just short-lived, And how did you and Lee Beard and Dixon and guys like Dom Lagana all, end up over there to have a good time?
That was all, Santo Rapisarda and their family. They came to me and said, "Look, we'd like you to drive our car." And so we kind of put together what I thought would be a good combination car. We got the car from DSR and ran all their parts and pieces. And his two boys were really learning at the time and doing very good. I was very surprised to see two young men in that stage of their life have really a very good hit on trying to make one of these cars run. And with Lee Beard helping them, that made it even easier, basically. Todd Okahara helped him as well, because my ties with Don were still there. So, we had fun in the United States, but I have to say, going over to Australia and driving and winning over there, it was a big deal. The Aussies versus the USA guys. And, like you said, I had a great time doing it. It was a lot of fun. And, Larry Dixon went and did it. Dom Lagana and myself went together and did a weekend over there. And just, that was actually the first time I ever really got to know Dom Lagana that much personally, because we have similar backgrounds. We raced with our family before we kind of went out and did our own thing. So, I respected Dom. Dom was a great driver, a good mechanic, really knows his way around Top Fuel dragster. And but every time I went down there, Lee Beard was tuning my car. So we would take whatever they had and make it work for us. And I think we won at least 2 or 3 in a row when I went down there. And so we were definitely getting to the point where we were feeling comfortable racing quarter mile again down there. And that was a lot of fun. And I thank them for that. So, but yes, I've made that Australia long flight many times. That's for sure.
And you're a driver who's been out of the seat and in the seat. How do you feel about the countdown? You obviously got to race in the countdown era. And me personally, I'm a fan of it, right? Every major sport has its regular season and playoffs. And that's what I love about the NHRA's playoff format. It's really neat. It comes down to the end. We know it could hurt some drivers and we know it could benefit some drivers, but overall, what's your view on it?
Well, if you are in the countdown and you're somewhere in the top 6, 7, and it gets to where we reset the points and you get on a hot streak, you're killing it. I mean, look at Tim Wilkerson. He went out and won 2 out of 3 races here lately. So that definitely propelled him back up to being in the right frame of drivers, basically. But yeah, you always had to step up to the next level. And as far as we stepped up and kept going and kept at it hard, either Tony Schumacher stepped up with us and did better, or it was a dogfight between always Larry Dixon and myself. And it's kind of a different format. We weren't sure about it when it started. If they did points, Stevie would just run away with the whole thing all the time. So a lot of guys don't like the reset, but I was okay with it.
And your last victory came in 2010, I believe, in Seattle. Was the last one of your career up to this point. Do you remember anything from that race at all, or was that kind of just you never thought that would have been your last national event victory?
No, definitely not. It was, I expected to stay in the sport and keep racing and winning races for as long as I could. And, when you look at that in a nutshell and go back, I mean, 34 victories is great. It's one less than Don Garlett's. And I would have always liked to at least match that deal. But there still is future. I still can
That's
drive a
right.
race car, and if the right deal comes along, I'm going to be part of it. So I'm definitely not out of the seat. There's like I said, should have never mentioned the word retirement because no matter what I do on the side, and we own a company, Dave Winter from Fab Tech and myself and his son own a company called Race Glass. So when I was racing the off-road deal, I figured, if we're going to be in this, we need to try to find a way to make money at it too. So we started building bodies, and we still do that. Fiberworks builds a lot of bodies for off-road vehicles, and we're probably right there second, along with them. And we've had a great season this last season. After COVID, everybody wanted to get back to racing. So we were very busy last season building Pro 2, Pro 4, and Pro Light bodies for those. And then it just keeps going. So now we're trying to add more things to Race Glass and kind of move out. We just took on Stan Sexton's sprint car deal, and
Oh,
what he
wow.
did is he bought that from Victory. So that's now Stan Sexton's deal. So he's building his first chassis right now, and we just completed our second sprint car body at Race Glass for him. So that's just another untapped market to get into, which always kind of connects me with the RevChem folks, because a lot of people ask you, what is RevChem Composites? Well, that's exactly what it is. Everything you need to do fiberglass or carbon fiber, whatever the case is, you buy it all from them. And so to have them, with me on the car and be able to go back and say, okay, I'm going to start this new venture. How do you do this? I mean, Pete Pendleton is the president of that, and he helped me quite a bit. I mean, as did Randy from Nordic Boats. I mean, Randy Davis and their family love him to death. They've been with me through thick and thin, bad seasons, good seasons, the whole deal. But there's just that. It's so hard to go out and find the right sponsors nowadays. So if you can connect your sponsors with other sponsors and other products and bring more to them, they're definitely more in a position to say, okay, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to drive next? And we want to be part of that. So I've been with them both over a decade now, and we've done some really cool stuff, and they're part of what's going to happen next year as well. So it's an exciting time again. Once in my life, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a driver, and I'm actually going to make some money, and so. But I'll be out there in Pomona. I'm going to Vegas as well. I'll do SEMA, do some signing stuff for a couple different groups, but for the most part, Impy, the VW company. I have a really good relationship with the folks over there, and I'll be at their booth signing SEMA here in 3.5 weeks from now almost. So things happen quick, but it's been an interesting season to watch NHRA drag racing. I have to thank Marcus from Camping World coming in and taking over
Absolutely.
the main deal. He's the man for doing that. That's awesome. So hopefully that's going to be a long relationship and one that can help make Top Fuel and NHRA drag racing big like it was when I first started. So we're all trying to get healthy again. That's the biggest thing. So one thing at a time, but I think the NHRA they've been there before. They've had to regrow the sport, and they're right now in that same position. I think they have the power and the will to do that. So if I can help that in any way, shape, or form, I'm in, because I like to see NHRA when it's got 20 cars qualifying for a 16 car field. I mean, that's what this has been built on. It's my whole life. So that's a big deal to me. So if they can get healthy and get back to it, that just opens up more seats for guys like me.
That's right, and they're bringing back the countdown, the shootout format, Top Fuel and Funny Car. So we are kind of going back, and NHRA is on a rise, like you said. Thank goodness for Marcus Lemonis to step up in a time where everybody's stepping back. In the middle of a
Correct.
pandemic, Camping World come up and set the tone. And it's a new era. You've driven in every era: Powerade, Winston, Full Throttle, Mellow Yellow. Now it's your turn in the Camping World era. So I'm excited to see you out, Cory. You mentioned your sponsors. You've had, your whole career in motorsports, you've had the same companies support you. They believe in what you do. And it's great to see you still have those people invest in you and your dream and keeping it alive. I can't wait to see you in Vegas, Pomona. We cannot wait to hear what you've got cooking up here. Anything coming from the Cory McClenathan Motorsports camp is always good news. I want to thank you so much, man, for your time. It's Tuesday here in California, and it's Tuesday. It's a busy day, so I was lucky enough to get you on for our show. Thank you so much, Cory, and everybody go and follow Cory on Facebook. Cory's got a Facebook page. You can follow all of Cory McClenathan Motorsports over there. All the news is going to be breaking soon. But wow, Cory, this was a great conversation. I appreciate you giving me the time.
No, thanks for having me. It's a lot of great memories with a lot of great drivers and owners and people. And it's just, it comes down to it. It is about people. This is what it's about. That's how you keep the sponsors. That's how you move forward. And I look forward to doing more of that. So can't wait to see you in Vegas.
You got it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.